I want to tell you about the morning I told my husband I was leaving the church. Not leaving him. Not leaving our farm or our children or our life. Leaving the church. And I want to tell you what happened next. Because what happened next is not what most people imagine when they picture an Amish husband being told that his wife's faith has changed. They imagine anger. They imagine punishment. They imagine a man using every tool the community had given him to keep a woman inside a boundary she no longer believed in. And some of that is true. But the full truth is more complicated and more painful than the simple version. And the complicated version is the one that stayed with me for 30 years. And the one I am finally ready to say out loud. Before I continue, I need to be honest with you about something. More than 90% of the people watching this right now have not subscribed yet. And I think about that. I think about all the people who find these stories and listen, and then move on without leaving any trace of themselves behind. If you have ever felt trapped inside a life that was built around you without your full consent, if you have ever wanted something different and been afraid of what wanting it would cost you, then you already know what this story is about. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell before we go further. It is free, and it is how these stories keep finding the people who need them most. And while you are here, tell me in the comments, what is the one decision in your life that you made for someone else that you are still carrying? I want to know. I read every word. My name for this story is not important. What is important is that I was 31 years old, married for 9 years, mother of 4 children, living on a farm in western Pennsylvania, in a community I had been born into and had never seriously imagined leaving. I had married at 22, which was considered somewhat late for our district. My husband, I will call him Aaron, was 28 when we married. He was a good farmer and a careful man, and he loved our children in the steady, undemonstrative way of Amish fathers. Present and reliable, and not given to softness, but genuinely there. We had built something together over 9 years. It was not the life I would have chosen if I had been shown all the options. But it was real, and it was ours. And I did not enter that morning conversation lightly. The doubts had been building for 3 years before I said anything to Aaron. 3 years of private questioning that I conducted entirely inside my own head, because there was nowhere else to conduct it. You do not bring doubt to your husband in an Amish marriage the way you might in an English one. You do not say, I have been thinking about this and I am not sure I believe it anymore, and then sit together and work through it as partners. Doubt is not a shared project. Doubt is a private failing that you are expected to resolve through prayer and submission and the trusted guidance of the bishop. To bring it to your husband is to bring him a problem he is then responsible for before the community. And so I carried it alone, the way I had learned to carry many things, in the part of myself that I kept very quiet and very still. What broke the silence was a book. An English woman who had grown up in a different closed religious community had written about her experience of leaving, and a neighbor of mine, a woman I will call Miriam who had English relatives, had passed it to me quietly one afternoon, and said nothing, except that she thought I might find it interesting. I read it in 3 days, in small pieces, hidden inside other tasks, the way you learn to do the things that are not permitted. And something happened when I read it that I had not expected. I did not feel inspired. I did not feel liberated. I felt recognized. I felt, for the first time, that the specific texture of what I had been experiencing inside my own mind had a name and a shape, and that other people had experienced it and survived it and gone on to build lives that were genuinely theirs. That recognition was more dangerous to the life I was living than any anger could have been. Anger, you can suppress. Recognition stays. I told Aaron on a Tuesday morning in October. The children were at school. We were in the kitchen after the morning work, and I sat down across from him at the table, and I said, I need to tell you something that is going to be hard to hear. He put down his coffee. He looked at me. He had the particular stillness of a man who already knows the shape of what is coming, even if he does not know the words yet. I told him that my faith had been changing for several years, that I had tried to resolve it through prayer and had not been able to, that I no longer believed in the Ordnung as the will of God, that I believed I needed to find a different way of living my faith, I did not say I was leaving. I said my faith had changed. I was trying to give us a place to start. Aaron was quiet for a very long time. The clock on the wall was loud in that silence. Then he said, "This is the devil's work." He said it without anger, which was almost worse than anger would have been. He said it with the complete and genuine conviction of a man who believed it entirely. And I understood in that moment that we were not going to be able to talk about this the way I had hoped, because we did not share enough common ground to stand on. He believed my doubt was an external attack on my soul. I believed my doubt was my soul trying to tell me something true. We were describing the same experience from opposite sides of a wall, and the wall had no door in it. What came next happened in stages, and I want to describe each stage carefully, because each one is its own kind of answer to the question in the title of this story. What do Amish husbands do when their wife wants to leave the church? The answer is not one thing. The answer is a series of things, each one arriving after the last, each one escalating in its own particular way. The first thing Aaron did was pray. He told me he was going to pray for me every day until God restored my faith, and he asked me to pray alongside him. And I did, because I was not yet sure enough of my own ground to refuse, and because I loved him in the way you love someone you have built a life with, even when you can no longer see the world the same way they do. We prayed together in the mornings for 2 weeks, and I felt the distance between us growing with every prayer. Because every prayer he offered was a prayer that I would become someone I no longer was, and I could not say amen to that and mean it, and not meaning amen while saying it was its own kind of fracture. The second thing he did was go to the bishop. He did not tell me he was going to do this. I found out when the bishop appeared at our door on a Thursday afternoon and asked to speak with me. I want to be precise about how that felt. It felt like being reported. It felt like something I had said in the privacy of my own kitchen to my own husband had been handed to an authority without my knowledge or consent. Aaron was not trying to harm me. I understood that then, and I understand it now. He was doing what his world told him to do when a wife's faith was in danger. He was seeking help from the structure that was supposed to protect the community. But I was the community member whose faith was in question, and I had not been asked whether I wanted the bishop involved. I had not been given the choice. And so, the conversation that was supposed to be between a husband and a wife became something much larger than that before I was ready. The bishop visited 3 times over the following month. I will not describe all 3 visits in detail because they had a similar shape. He sat at my table, and he spoke to me about the dangers of pride and the way the outside world plants seeds of rebellion in the hearts of women who have opened themselves to English influence. He asked me where I had encountered the ideas I was entertaining. He was not unkind. He was patient in the way that people are patient, when they are completely certain they are right, and are simply waiting for you to arrive at the same certainty. What he was not was curious. He did not ask me what I actually believed or why. He did not ask me what had changed or what questions I had been carrying. He arrived each time already knowing what was wrong with me and offering the correction, and the correction was always the same word: submit. The third thing Aaron did was the one that cost me the most. He began involving the children, not directly, not in the way you might fear when I say that. He did not tell them their mother was in spiritual danger. He was not cruel in his parenting, but he began having longer prayers with them in the evenings, prayers that emphasized obedience to God and to the community, prayers that were clearly shaped by what was happening between us, even though my name was never said. And I would sit at the edge of those prayers with my children's heads bowed around me, and I would feel the particular loneliness of a person who is being prayed against in their own home by the people they love most. That loneliness is different from other kinds of loneliness. It has a texture I do not have a word for, even now. 4 months after that first Tuesday morning conversation, Aaron told me that if I left the church, I would be shunned. He did not say he would shun me. He said the community would shun me, and that he would be bound by the community's decision. He said this carefully, and he said it with genuine pain on his face, and I believed the pain was real. He was not threatening me. He was describing a reality he had not created and could not change. He was telling me that the structure he lived inside had rules and that the rules did not bend for love. And the thing I have thought about most in the 30 years since is that he was right about that. The structure did not bend for love. The structure had never been designed to bend for love. The structure had been designed to hold its shape, regardless of what individual people felt inside it. I left in March. My youngest was 5. My oldest was 11. I walked out of that house on a morning when the ground was still hard, and the sky was the particular pale gray of early spring in Pennsylvania. And I carried one bag, because I had been told I could take one bag, and I went to an English woman I had spoken to twice through a community outreach organization that helped people leaving closed religious communities. Her name was Sandra, and she drove a green car, and she did not ask me questions I was not ready to answer. She drove, and I looked out the window at the English world moving past me at a speed I was not used to, and I did not cry until we had been driving for 40 minutes. And then I cried for a long time, without making any sound. The shunning came quickly. My parents did not speak to me. My sisters did not speak to me. Women I had known my entire life crossed the road, rather than greet me when I came back to the area in the first months after leaving. Aaron did not shun me completely, and that is the part I have never fully known how to hold. He allowed me to see the children, not because the community approved, it did not, but because he made a private decision that his children needed their mother, and that this need was larger than the structure's rules. He never said this to me directly. He simply did not stop the visits. And I understood that this was its own kind of courage, inside a world where courage looked different than it does outside. I want to tell you what I learned about Amish husbands from living through this, not as a general rule because no group of people is one thing, but from the inside of my own specific experience. Aaron did not refuse to let me go because he wanted to control me. He refused because he genuinely believed that my soul was in danger and that he was responsible for it. He had been given a role that included being the spiritual head of the household. And he took that role seriously, in the same way he took every other responsibility seriously, with his whole self, without reservation. The problem was not that he was a bad man. The problem was that the role itself was built on a foundation that did not account for a woman who had her own soul and her own access to what was true and her own conclusions about what God required of her. The role assumed that a wife's faith would move in the same direction as her husband's. When it did not, the role had no instructions for what to do except hold tighter. I have been out for 30 years. I built a life slowly and with a great deal of help from people who asked nothing of me except that I try. I found work. I found community of a different kind. I found a faith that was quieter and less certain, and more genuinely mine. My children are adults now. 2 of them left the community eventually. 2 stayed. I love all 4 of them without condition, and they know it. And that knowing has been the most important work of my life. Outside those walls, Aaron died 6 years ago. A neighbor who had known us both sent me a card. I kept it. I kept it because whatever else was true about our 9 years together, he had been the father of my children, and he had not fully shunned me. And he had let me see my children when he did not have to. I have never been sure whether to call that love. But I have never been sure it was not. If you are inside a life right now that is holding its shape around you while you have changed inside it, I see you. If you have tried to say something true to someone you love and had it handed to an authority before you were ready, I see you. If you have sat at the edge of someone else's prayer and felt the loneliness of being prayed against by people who believe they are praying for you, I see you completely. You are not faithless for changing. You are not sinful for growing into a shape the structure was not built to hold. The soul that kept asking questions in the quiet of your own mind was not the devil's work. It was the most honest thing in the house. Before you leave, I want to thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for staying with me all the way to the end of this. I know these are long stories, and I know there are faster things you could have watched today. But you stayed, and staying matters more than you know. I want to be honest with you about one thing before you go. More than 90% of the people who watch these stories have not yet subscribed. And if this reached something in you today, If it named something you have been carrying without a name, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so the next story finds you when it arrives. It is completely free, and it is the only way I know to keep these voices traveling. And before you go, tell me in the comments what part of this stayed with you the longest. Tell me your story if you are ready, or simply tell me that you are listening. I will read every word of every comment, because every word matters. Until next time, remember this. A structure that cannot hold your full self was never built for you, and the life that fits you is still waiting to be found.